Ellie Price there. Well, we've been joined from Cardiff by the UKIP member of the Welsh Assembly, Mark Reckless, and from Brussels by the Liberal Democrat MEP, Catherine Bearder. Welcome to both of you, and I'll come to both of you in just a moment. But first of all, Oliver Letwin, because you were involved in this before you lost your job, just tell us briefly, do you favour the UK cutting loose in what they call a sort of hard Brexit from the customs union and then trying to negotiate some sort of relationship with the EU?
I don't think those are decisions that you can make sort of unilaterally. The question is, what is doable with our EU partners?
And what do you think is doable?
I don't know yet, and I think it will take some while to feel that out. What I am clear about is what we need to get out of this at the end. And the first thing we need to get is clarity that we will be able to sell retail, financial and professional services into the European market. That's absolutely crucial for the City of London, which is a large part of our economy.
So access to the single market in that regard.
Very specifically, retail, financial and professional services. Secondly, we need to get a continuation of the zero tariff regime that we have on exports and imports of goods, which I think is actually the relatively easy thing to achieve because it's in the mutual interest. And third, and this is what makes the first in particular very difficult, I think we need to reassert what the British people have voted for, which is control over migration. Now, the question here is, how do you put that package together?
So
and I think that you can only feel out.
Right, you want to have your cake and eat it, is what some critics would say.
Correct.
Right,
that's what we want. We want cake and eating it.
But would you be prepared to take some element of freedom of movement in order to guarantee your first point, which is the retail services and financial services sector being preserved?
Well, speaking for myself, if I was a one-man show and I was the only person in the UK, yes, I would, as a matter of fact. But the people of our country didn't vote for that. They voted, I think, clearly for control, absolute control over migration.
Mark Reckless, what trade arrangements should we have now and how should we go about it?
Well, we have trade arrangements now where we trade freely with the European Union, and I expect they'll be maintained. I mean, the status quo, it may be described as a temporary arrangement, but the reality is that 5 people are employed in the EU exporting to the UK for every 3 who are employed in the UK exporting to the EU, so it's very strongly in our mutual interest, and I expect that will continue.
Well, you say that, and of course there is an expectation, it seems, that both you and Oliver Letwin hold on to, which is the idea that because of the arrangements in terms of exports, that countries like Germany will be very keen to cut at that sort of deal. But actually, the head of the BDI, Germany's industry federation, has said there'll be no access to the single market for the UK without freedom of movement. They don't seem that keen.
Well, then there'd be significant tariffs on his members' goods being sold to the UK, and they sell vastly more to us than we do to them.
He seems prepared to take that
so
risk.
I think that's very unlikely, and I wonder if you correctly understood what he said, because certainly the BDI has put out strong statements before saying that free trade must be maintained with the UK, and that's what we'd expect.
So, Catherine Bearder, it's bluff, really, from the Germans and also from Matteo Renzi in Italy today to try and say that there will not be a favourable deal for the UK. In the end, practical matters will come to the fore, particularly when it comes to business.
Look, I think you have to get it right. We don't have access to the free movement, to the single market. We are a full member of the European Union. Okay, so in the same way that Wales is a full member of the UK. And so there are no restrictions on trade and working that way. Now, if we're coming out, then they say, well, OK, the rules are you have full access and you're a full member and you have to sign up to full movement. If we're outside that, then the rules will be different. So America actually trades with the European Union. There are American banks working in the European Union. They have to pay and abide by the rules and have permission to do that.
Right. Well, let's put that.
At the moment, as a full member, we don't have all that rigmarole to go through.
What do you say to that, Mark?
So we're taking ourselves out of that.
Well, the American banks will have regulatory equivalence in the jargon with what happens in the EU, and under what the EU terms MiFID II, that will allow all banks in countries that have regulatory equivalence with the EU, and we certainly do, given we're subject to its regulatory regime at the moment, to be able to passport services into the EU. So I don't see that either as a particularly challenging sort of area. What I
Right.
do think we'll be able to do is open up third markets overseas, particularly to our tradable services, which we do so well, and that I think offers real opportunities to improve the prosperity of the United Kingdom in the future.
Right, Catherine Beer, you're shaking your head. Is that not possible?
Well, why would the European Union give it to us? At the moment we're a full member, we abide by the rules, we play a part in making the rules, and that is accepted. Why would they give us the same access when we're outside, when we've taken ourselves off?
Well, let me put that to
Because
Oliver.
that's what its own
Hang on, Mark.
rules say.
Right, hang on, Mark Reckless. Let me put that to Oliver Letwin, because you at least seem to be facing the prospect that you couldn't have both, and that you would be prepared to give on freedom of movement, which Theresa May has indicated she feels Britain can't do because of the result of the referendum. If that is the case, what would happen to things like passporting for financial services? I mean, how disastrous would it be?
Well, I think Mark is right that, undoubtedly, that MiFID II allows for countries that have equivalent regulatory regimes to export the retail financial services without going through great rigmaroles. The question is, could we get, and we need to get, some kind of guarantee that we would continue to have that access? But there are all sorts of things we have to trade in this very complicated negotiation. So there are all sorts of post-Brexit arrangements which are in the mutual interests of Britain and the EU. And so there's a lot of discussion to go on. My experience of negotiating, which I've done quite a lot of over the last many years, is that if you reduce these things to stark simplicities in a way that goes down well on TV, so to speak, it all goes wrong. What you have to do, and what I'm sure the government is doing, is very subtly to unpick all the many elements and work through them so you get a package which it doesn't, you shouldn't think of this as just the EU and us. There are 27 other member states, there are 3 EU institutions, each of them has different agendas. You have to knit this thing together.
Sure, so it's going to be complicated, and it's going to take a long time. And a new report out today from the Institute for Government says Whitehall will need to spend £65 million per year on 500 new staff. So rather than trying to get the UK out of unnecessary regulation, as many Eurosceptics thought, we're actually going to be engaging in more bureaucracy to try and unpick this very complicated process you've just outlined.
Well, you have to put these things in some kind of context. £65 million a year is to be compared with £700 billion a year.
If you get the deal you want.
That's 2,000 times, 10,000 times as much.
If you're going to get the deal you want. And of course we don't know that at this particular stage. I mean, the reports in the Financial Times says that there is a shortage of space, that staff don't have anywhere to work in the Brexit department, that laptops are being shared.
These are not very serious problems.
Well, aren't they?
These are the kinds of problems you get over in matters of weeks. Of course they make good press, but they're really pretty trivial. No, the serious thing here is that there's a great big game of multi-dimensional chess that is going to have to be played, and I certainly do agree with what you were saying, that it's going to take a long time to get it right. I think Theresa's a very good, long-distance, persistent negotiator, and I suspect that in the end we will get our cake and we will be able to eat it.
Right, well, Catherine Bearder, there you go.
Well, no, because it does take an awful long time to do these negotiations. I agree with that. Whitehall has got its own problems, and it's going to gobble up a lot of that money that was promised to the NHS in the referendum. It will take years. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement has taken 8 years.
And it's still got to be ratified.
And it's still got to be ratified, and they're now really concerned because if we're outside that, a large part of that trade agreement was because the UK was involved. So it has to be done sector by sector. You're talking about toys, about chemicals, about drugs, about agriculture and the chemicals you can use in agriculture and the methods. I mean, it just takes forever to do a trade agreement bilaterally. But at the moment our businesses have access. They have access, and we are making those rules.
Right, but Mark
Outside, it's going to take forever. Are you going to tell those businesses that they can just go wait for 4 or 5 years while we're busy negotiating?
What about the uncertainty question that Catherine Bidder? Hang on, Catherine Bidder. What about the uncertainty question that is raised? Because if the UK isn't definitely leaving the customs union, and I suppose we don't yet know, in a way, what's Liam Fox going to do over the next few years? as head of international trade? I mean, because while we are still a member of the EU Customs Union, we're forbidden from negotiating our own bilateral agreements with third parties. He's not going to have anything to do.
Well, we're forbidden from agreeing them. I mean, we can negotiate, or certainly at least discuss potential arrangements that we might sign immediately on exiting. I think it's quite clear we are going to leave the customs union. But yes, I mean, there can be lengthy trade discussions. But while they're going on, the status quo is that we have free trade and open access. So unless Catherine Bearder thinks that the EU is going to apply the common external tariff and pay far more of that than we would, then what will happen is there'll be a transitional arrangement where we have the status quo, we transition to whatever these are longer term arrangements, but on the basis of we currently have that open access. But what we can do is we can negotiate with Canada, we can negotiate with the United States. Well, and rather than having this very complex, restrictive and frankly protectionist negotiation the EU has, we can actually open up our markets much more, perhaps go back to the Cassis de Dijon principle of having actually mutual recognition of our regulations. So instead of agreeing a single set of regulations everyone has to apply to trade, actually as long as you are compliant with one set of regulations, then your goods and hopefully many sector services are accepted as well. That's going to be the future.
Hang on, Catherine Bearder, and Mark Reckless, I think you've lost your earpiece there. But Oliver Letwin, are you happy with the three Brexiteers?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think they're a very formidable team.
Do you? Do you think they'll actually get on? I mean, as you would say, the media is reporting that there is already some sort of discourse between the three of them. But isn't it an impossible task for them as a trio to come together and bring forward some sort of coherent plan when they're all approaching it from such different angles?
Oh, I was constantly told during the years of the coalition that it would fall apart any moment and politicians can't do deals with one another. So it's absolute nonsense. Politicians are grown-ups, they work these things out. Of course, it makes good press when, you know, you can say that this or that is being debated. But actually, no, of course they can get on. The critical point, however, is that it's not in the end anybody else. My whole experience of the last few years is that when you're negotiating these kinds of things, in the end, it's done head of government to head of government. This is Theresa May who's going to have to carry this. As I say, I have had some experience over many years of negotiating with Theresa, and I don't envy the people on the other side of the table in the sense she is very good at it.
Right, but it will be her decision, and the others
in the
will
end,
be very
it will be her that drives this. They can help, many other people can help, but in the end, it's down to Theresa.
All right, Catherine Bearder and Mark Reckless, thank you both very much. We've run out of time, I'm afraid, but we will obviously be revisiting this.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.